Hey, so I read my book it's called Silent Souls Weeping, and it's really just a book that talks a lot about depression, which was kind of cool to read about just because I feel like it's not something that I'm super knowledgeable of, just because I feel like I grew up in a home where it was almost looked at as mental illness is not really a real thing, and you kind of just gotta pick yourself up and keep going. And so seeing siblings that have struggled with mental illness and not really getting the right help they need, I feel like this book was really eye-opening in how I can do little things just to help them out. Especially my younger brother, I feel like he's had a lot of things added on and the struggles that he's faced just because he hasn't gotten the proper help that he needs. And this book, it kind of goes through just different aspects of depression. I'm very religious, and this is taken from a church standpoint. And so it just talks about depression as like a missionary and serving, and it talks about how depression can oftentimes lead you to not really being able to feel the spirit, and can really be a problem, especially in like if you are a very religious person. That can kind of mess with like your religious beliefs and how you feel about your church. And it even talked about like postpartum depression, so just different aspects in life. I'm trying to remember what else. They talked about depression along with other mental illnesses as well, especially coped along with like perfectionism and kind of how those spin off of each other and can oftentimes lead to suicide. And so a lot of this was just talking about people just sharing their different stories and their experiences with mental illness. So I'm going to be honest, it was a little bit difficult trying to find chemistry in here. So a couple of them, I'm going to be completely honest, are a little bit of a stretch. The biggest one that I thought was really cool is so in the chapter that's talking about how depression can kind of basically lead you to having a numbness of feeling, and in a religious standpoint, how you can struggle feeling the spirit. And so it just talked about, there was an analogy it gives, and it uses like the electricity in a home. And I probably won't read the whole paragraph, but it just talks about how like there's wires running through a home, and if there's like too much current going, it can trip a breaker, and how the electricity in that part of the home is turned off temporarily just because the electricity can't reach it. And it just talked about how that is kind of similar to being able to feel the spirit, that even though you can't really feel the spirit, doesn't mean that the spirit isn't coming in. I don't know if that makes sense, but it made sense in the book the way they explained it. Another thing it talked about, I guess I'm supposed to show you, this is kind of where they talk about the electricity, and then a little bit before on the page and also later in the book it talks about this, but I can't remember what page it was on. But it just talks about how in the study of depression, they look into like the chemical makeup of the brain, and how depression and even just mental illness in general is oftentimes that chemical imbalance. And then another thing that I thought was kind of chemistry related, I know there's a few times in class where you would tell us to like give an example of a certain chemical reaction or whatever, and then it would just be us breathing. And so that was kind of my other stretch of a chemistry related thing, but a lot of the coping skills that they suggest is like breathing exercises. But anyways, like I was saying, I feel like this was a really good book, and I feel like very eye-opening for me. I feel like there was a lot of quotes that I really liked in it. One being that I think this was also the part about like not being able to like super feel the spirit when you're struggling with mental illness. And it just says, I realize that you can decide that your faith is real, your conversion and your conviction to the gospel and the restoration are real, even while you have periods when you're not feeling the spirit. I just thought that was cool, because I think oftentimes we struggle with faith and think like, oh, it's all my fault. But just because you can't necessarily feel a super overwhelming, powerful spiritual experience, it doesn't mean that you can't choose to keep going in your faith and your beliefs. So I thought that was cool.